Hi, Travis Tjepkema, President, Church Casualty Insurance Agency. Thank you for being here today. We are glad to welcome back Matthew Boomhower. He's an architect and attorney, and he is the owner of Southern Cross Property Consultants. They specialize in construction management, architecture, and facilities consulting. Thank you for being here, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. Apparently it went well last time.
It went great last time, and we just want to do a 2024 update and just kind of get an update on where things are at related to risk management around your property. So Matthew, why don't we start with just about checking out your property, somebody walking the property.
So it's funny to me. One of the things we hear from people all the time is they're like, "Yeah, I'm busy. I don't have time to walk around." And when we ask them, we're like, "Well, who's responsible for actually like walking the property and checking to see are there lights burned out? Are there things that aren't working? Is there a faucet that's running constantly? Something like that." People are like, "I don't know. I think it's somebody else's job." And so one of the things we always tell people is, look, some of this is really simple. I mean, one of the greatest things about my job is we're not saving lives. We're not sending people to the moon. We're just helping people build buildings, renovate buildings, maintain their facilities. So don't make this harder than it needs to be. One of the easiest ways to stay on top of your building is actually just have somebody, one person, who's got the responsibility for walking around, I'd say weekly, at least bi-weekly, and just going through the different spaces, checking to make sure things are right, looking for things that look off. You don't have to be a building and grounds maintenance expert to know that, gosh, there probably shouldn't be brown stains on that ceiling tile, or there shouldn't be, like this toilet shouldn't be running constantly, or those types of things.
Yeah, I call it like wearing the hat. You know, we have an insurance, we have a bunch of, who's wearing this hat for taking this ownership of this, and it's just what you're saying is really like who's taking ownership of doing this and checking things out.
Well, it's the ownership, and then there's an accountability piece as well, because look, we're all busy, and I've talked to administrators or administrative pastors who have said, yeah, here's the problem. I'll see something, and then somebody will grab me and they need to ask me a question, or I see somebody I haven't seen in a while, and so I'm catching up with them. And by the time I get back to my desk, I don't remember all the things I saw when I was walking. And so part of this is just having a process for how are you documenting what you're seeing? How are you assigning who's responsible for making sure that thing gets addressed or taken care of? How are we making, and then how are we checking and following up to make sure that it was actually done?
What are some key top warning signs? Like you see something, a running toilet, it's okay, fix the plunger in the back, et cetera. But what's some key areas that you really want to focus on as far as like this could be something that could be a major issue? So
there's a joke in the architectural world that you can always tell who the architects are in any group of people because we walk in and we immediately look up. Most people don't do that when they come into a space.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked how many times I point something out to a client where I'm like, hey, have you noticed that there's water staining or there's wood rot here or there's plants growing out of your gutter? And it's really obvious things, but people just aren't looking up. They're used to, looking at eye level and down. And so one of the things I always tell people is just look around. I mean, water staining doesn't happen overnight. And if it does, that's a problem. Right. So, there's just so many little things like that you can see where you're like, oh, that doesn't look right. We should look into that. And even if you're not the person that's going to get up on the ladder to look at it, somebody else can pop the ceiling tile or go up and poke or prod and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about one of the things that has really caught the eye of insurance carriers lately is electrical panels in particular. So why don't you talk about some of the electrical panels out there and something to really keep an eye on, because in addition to looking up, I'm sure not everybody stops every day at their electrical panel and takes a look, or maybe even knows
what
kind of electrical panel they have. So I encourage you, right now, go and look and see what kind of electrical panel your house of worship has. But go ahead. What are some key concerns there?
I'll take it one step further. If you have a panel that was manufactured by a company called Zinsco, you should start having some serious conversations with electricians, because this was a very, very popular electrical panel. They were sold all over. I mean, I've seen them all over the United States, but they were very popular in Southern California. And it's what the problem with these panels are, they were using, I won't get super wonky, but the way circuit panels work is there's what's called bus bars inside. There are these two metal bars that actually come down and clamp down on the wires. And that's what closes the circuit. And then the circuit breaker's actually on it, so if there's a problem, that trips. Well, the bus bars in Zinsco panels were aluminum, which is great. It's a very inexpensive product, but they expand and contract at a much higher rate than copper or some of the other metals that we now use in these panels. And so I've actually seen these panels where an electrician takes the cover off, and the panels the bars are separated so much that you can actually watch electrical current arc across.
Wow.
And that's why insurance carriers hate these things.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is a little dust bunny to get down in there, or, if you've got mice and a mouse gets up in there or whatever, it doesn't take much for these panels to arc across and actually create a problem.
Zinsco, Zinsco.
Yeah.
Do you know about when they stopped putting those into buildings? So maybe if I have a building built after 19... et cetera, I most likely won't have a Zinsco panel.
They were pretty much no longer being installed by the 90s.
Okay.
But that's the challenge. So many of our church campuses were built out in, kind of in parallel with the Southern California building boom post-war. So we've got a lot of properties that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe into the 80s, and they were still being used during those time periods. And so, we'll frequently find them. And it's not just your main distribution panel, it's also going to be your sub panels in different places. So the one that's in the janitor's closet that everybody forgets about until a breaker goes, you got to check those as well.
So usually there's a label on it that says Zinsco.
Yep.
So if you have one of those, exchange it out.
I would
highly encourage to exchange it out. Do you have, I'm not going to hold you to this, what's approximate cost of?
I mean, it really depends, but we're talking thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you just think about the fact that, your replacement cost, if your panel shorts out and actually causes a fire, is going to be in the tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
A few $1,000s to change out a panel it seems like it's a pretty easy decision to make.
Smart thing to do. Okay, so now if you don't have a Zinsco panel, how often should you have an electrical panel, your electrical inspected?
I mean, generally speaking, the actual service panels themselves, you can probably just have them checked every 3 years.
Okay.
It's not something that, I'm thinking about it now and I'm trying to remember the last time I checked the one at my house. They generally work fine. You just have to periodically check them and make sure there's something there. But if you do start to notice that you're tripping breakers all the time, if you do start, like there's going to be telltale signs. And if you're starting to see that especially if it's more than just one circuit that keeps tripping over and over, that's when you probably need to take a look at it. And the most common problems you're going to find with your panels, unless it's one of these older, scarier styles, typically it's just that the breaker itself is actually wearing out. A lot of people don't realize that, like GFCI outlets, which are great, they're like the ones you have in your kitchen or your bathroom.
Right.
They're designed to trip maybe 5 or 6 times, and then you should replace them because every time they trip, it just makes them less effective. It's the same thing with the circuit breakers in your actual distribution panels.
Right.
So if they've tripped more than 3 or 4 times, it's probably time to have an electrician out to swap that out. That also gives you a chance to just double check and make sure, this is generally how you find out that somebody has daisy chained like 3 surge protectors together to run 12 space heaters in a computer.
Right. Yeah, very good. Thank you. That's great information. What do you mean by temporary never is?
So there's a couple of these things that I've just learned over the years working with churches. And one of them that I almost feel like I should have this tattooed on my body somewhere. People will come to me and they'll be like, okay, well, we don't really have the money to do this the way you're proposing, so we're just going to do X as a temporary fix. And I always come back to them and I'm like, look, temporary never is, because you're a church and money's always tight and people are going to forget about it because you've solved the problem.
Right.
So I don't care if somebody comes to you and says, I know we've got this stuff blocking this hallway to the emergency exit.
Right.
but it's only going to be there until we're done with this program and then we're going to move it. No, it's not. It's going to be there until somebody makes them move it.
Yeah.
You know, if you sit there and say, okay, we're going to put a Band-Aid fix, you know, we're going to use duct tape and binder's twine to,
Right.
you know, try to fix this problem for now. And then we'll come back and do a real fix later. You're not going to, because you're going to have moved on to the next thing. So I tell this to our clients all the time. Temporary never is. You think you're doing this as a temp fix, but you gotta, again, it goes back to that accountability piece.
Yeah.
Who's going to make sure that you actually go back and fix it properly later on?
Right. Stitches, not a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. All right. What about the I've got a guy syndrome? We talked about this last time, but it's a good reminder.
We did. And it's just because I see this so often. And by the way, we have secular clients as well as religious clients. Everybody does this. Everybody, like, you'll get contractors that'll come in and you'll get bids on something, and everybody looks at them and they're like, wow, this is way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. And somebody, thinking that they're doing you a favor, is going to be like, you know what? I've got a guy.
Yeah.
This dude, we don't need to hire these contractors to do this renovation project. I had somebody that changed out my bathroom at the house. I'm sure they'd be able to give us a lower number. They probably can.
Yeah.
But if they've never done a renovation project at that scale or a construction project at that scale, you're probably tripping over a dollar or picking up a dime.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we see this over and over. I just had a congregation that had a roof leak, and there's multiple congregations that worship in this facility, and one of the pastors was like, hey, I've got a guy. Somebody in my congregation works for a roofing company. He's willing to come out. He's willing to get up on the roof and do this. Well, I know you're already thinking through this, but immediately my thought went to, okay, this guy doesn't have insurance. If he falls off this roof or gets hurt while he's doing this, who's going to cover the claim?
Right.
And it's not just like I know that sounds cold-hearted, like you and I are thinking about it from a risk management and a liability standpoint.
Sure.
But the reality is, this guy's the breadwinner for his family. If he comes off this roof and gets hurt and he can't work for 6 weeks, who's feeding his family? So I think that's the other reason why this is so dangerous is just sitting there and saying, yes, you might get it less expensively, but at what cost?
Right. And it goes back to your temporary, you know, as well as like doing it well permanently too. And you get what you pay for. So, and you're fixing something that is not just for you to see and it looks good for now. It's for future generations, right? So you want it done right.
Exactly. It's a stewardship issue. I mean, a true funny story, and you know I went to the University of Tennessee. You forgive me for this all the time, but when we were in Knoxville, my now wife at the time, girlfriend's parents were living in Birmingham, and as we would drive down to Birmingham to visit with them, there was a plumbing company outside Birmingham, right along the freeway, and painted in huge letters on the side of their building, it said, "We fix what your husband repaired."
I can relate to that comment. Unfortunately, too closely, but no, that's good. All right, let's talk about water intrusion. It's the biggest source of loss in all buildings.
Yeah,
any and all buildings, not just house of worship. Any building you deal with.
Absolutely.
Water.
I mean, you know, slip and falls. There's some other things that are going to contribute. But when we talk about just what happens to a building that causes an insurance claim, it's always water intrusion. And one of the problems is it starts to get into that whole out of sight, out of mind problem. Most people don't go up on roofs. They just don't.
Right.
You know, Becky Malott in my office, I mean, she's terrified of heights. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people aren't necessarily going to just pop up on a roof and look around. And there's a lot of good reasons that you probably shouldn't have your church administrator or a volunteer up on your roof, like we just talked about.
Right.
But you should actually have a roofing company coming out and looking at your roof annually.
Right.
Period, full stop. Because so many roof leaks happen because it's the little things. Like, you might have a roof that's designed to last 30 years, but all those little vertical penetrations where the pipes come up through or ductwork comes up through, the mastic that's around that is only designed to last 2 to 3 years under UV exposure. So that's all going to start to dry out and crack. If you have tree trash, leaves, branches, things that are blocking a drain and causing water to back up, and then it's getting around something where you've got a little cracking or a little drying, you can start to have water come in. it's just, this is another one of those ounce of prevention, pound of cure. It makes so much sense. And having a company under contract to come out and inspect your roofs annually,
Right.
dirt cheap,
Right.
really, really inexpensive.
That's great information. Well, first of all, just hear those words. It's cheap. Do not get on the roof yourself, okay? Don't put a volunteer up there. Don't put yourself up there. Get a roofing inspection contract and let them come out and look at it once a year. And it's kind of, roofs are one of those things that, like gutters too. It's like if you don't see it, if you're not up there, you don't know what's going on. It's like rain in Southern California, you don't know you need windshield wipers until it starts raining.
Exactly.
And so don't wait till it's too late. You need to inspect, check it out now. So those great points. Yeah.
And we actually have a great advantage in Southern California because we do have a defined rainy season. So I can tell you, if you wait until you have roof leaks, it's going to take forever for the roofing contractor to get out to you because they're chasing roof leak repairs all over Southern California. It just started raining. So if you can get onto somebody's schedule outside the rainy season where they're coming out to your property in May, June, July, sometime there, they're slow, they're happy for the work, they can do the little touch-up maintenance stuff,
Right.
and then they don't have to mess with it. But the other advantage to this is a lot of times, especially the really good companies that'll do this, they're also going to point out other things to you. They'll take some pictures up on the roof and they might show you, hey, the electrical disconnect for this HVAC piece of equipment's actually rusted out a little bit. Right. You might want to bring out somebody to take a look at that. Or this skylight's got a crack in it. You might want to actually think about putting that on your maintenance plan. It's not an urgent fix, but you can start to think about those things.
Yeah, and it's good to get on the roof too. It reminds me of one of our Lutheran insureds years ago that had a flat roof on a really high roof, flat roof in their sanctuary, and discovered that a homeless person was living up there for months and starting his own little campfires.
Yep.
So It's good to get on your roof, folks. It's good to check out, see what's going on up there.
Yeah, it really is. The other reason that it's so important not to have volunteers doing stuff on your roof is because I've seen a lot of well-meaning volunteer repairers where they simply didn't understand the chemistry of the products that were being used on the roof. And so, you can walk into Home Depot or Lowe's and you can pick up a can of Henry's, which is a bitumen mastic that you can put on, to try to touch up these things and patch. But there's actually a number of roofing systems, especially the more modern ones, that they're chemically incompatible. So now you've actually made the problem worse.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you just voided your 30-year warranty on that roof that you put in because somebody that didn't know what they were doing did something on that roof.
Right. Good stuff. Insurance, almost every insurance policy doesn't get into normal wear and tear. Also, like deferred maintenance. So, if you're just not taking care of your property, it's normal wear and tear. Insurance typically is not going to cover that. So, just again, stress the importance of not deferring maintenance to your structures.
Well, so first of all, there's the stewardship issue that we talked about. Look, you're responsible for the care of your buildings. They were a gift to the congregation by previous generations. You need to gift them forward. So there's that. But the other issue is, nobody wants to make an insurance claim. You don't want your clients to call you and say, hey, we just had a roof leak, or hey, we just had this pipe burst or something like that. But then you don't also want to be the one that has to go back to them and say, yeah, we've talked to the claims adjuster and it's not going to be covered because they feel like it was normal wear and tear. So if you can actually show that you're being proactive with your maintenance, that you've been keeping up with things, it actually makes it a lot easier if you get into a claim situation to be able to rule some of those things out and say, yes, actually, we have been maintaining this. This wasn't a normal wear and tear thing. It was a catastrophic loss of some kind, and hopefully that's going to be covered.
And I can speak from the insurance standpoint that it's now more important than ever in the California marketplace, especially. It's really shifted from a coverage and cost scenario to insurability. And I can't stress enough that if you have deferred maintenance, it's now more important than ever for insurability sake to put that new roof on, to change out that electrical panel, to do the proactive things to show an insurance carrier you're taking care of the care and condition of your facility. So I could just say now is the time. It's not later.
Well, I'll actually layer one more piece on top of that. So even though churches and religious organizations aren't generally going to get their loans through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac if they go get money, those are residential mortgage lenders.
Right.
But Fannie and Freddie are the 800-pound gorilla in the lending industry, and they've changed their lending standards recently, where they actually require applicants to talk about, well, do you have deferred maintenance on your property before we're even going to underwrite a loan or consider it?
Right.
Well, that's now spread across the entire banking industry. And so we're seeing apartment owners and commercial buildings and churches that are actually trying to get money to do a project or to refinance something that are being turned down because they have deferred maintenance.
Right.
And so it just becomes a compounding issue.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about replacement cost. When we talk about replacement cost, we're not talking about market cost. Market cost is what you could sell the facilities for. Replacement cost is what it cost to rebuild the facilities. Like kind, like quality is replacement cost. So what's the trends there? What's happening with replacement cost?
Well, I mean, everything's way more expensive. I mean, we've just from a maintenance standpoint or just a cost standpoint, we've seen costs increase 2 to 2.5 times just in the last 4 years. Inflation in the construction industry has been way higher than just general consumer inflation, which has been bad in and of itself. There's a bunch of reasons for that. COVID didn't help. There were supply chain issues. We all know that it's hard to find people to work, and so everybody's paying people more. So that's increased wages. We've also the construction industry's actually never recovered from the Great Recession back in 2008 to 2010. We lost about 45% of the people working in the construction trades, left the industry and never came back, and we've never really backfilled all of that. And so we've had this systematic or structural challenge for a while. But what we're seeing pretty frequently now is that people think they have a good replacement cost for their building, and they're not. They're maybe 40 to 50% of what it would cost to actually truly replace the building, like in kind, under modern codes, up to standards.
Right.
And so if you've got buildings, like if you have a building that was built anytime prior to 2020, you can't just assume that the replacement cost is what you paid for that building.
Right.
It's just not even in the same ballpark.
Now, we've known this for a few years, seen it, like you said, mentioned all the stats there on like how it's increased. Last 12 months, have you seen a stabling? Has it, even in the last year, it's continued to rise? Or what are you seeing in the last, what's the future projection? Is it kind of leveling out? Is it going to continue to rise? What do you think there?
It seems like it's leveling out. It's definitely moderated, so it's still going up. We're seeing increases now in the 2 to 5% range, as opposed to the 10 to 15 to 20% range that we were seeing over the last several years. So I'm cautiously optimistic that it's stabilizing. The challenge is there's still a ton of demand. So I mean, you can't drive around anywhere in Southern California without seeing construction cranes and construction sites working. And so until demand slows down, which it doesn't show any signs of doing it, we're probably not going to see. We're certainly not going to see prices come down.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks for that information. Let's talk about budgets, maintenance and replacement budgets.
One of the recurring conversations that we've been having with all our clients, especially with our church clients, is, so look, we get it. COVID happened. Everything got put on hold. Then we came out of COVID. It took a little bit of time to get back. So what we're seeing is we're actually getting very busy with people reaching out to us and talking about, okay, we were planning on doing this project in 2020, 2021. It was on our work plan, and now we're getting to it. And what they're realizing is the budget that they had for that project at that time isn't even close now. It's off by 35 to 50%, depending on what the project is. And so that's one of the other challenges that we've been seeing lately is we're starting, I feel like I have a pastor friend who refers to me as his favorite Old Testament prophet because I constantly come in with bad news. But I feel like that for a lot of our clients because I'm constantly coming in and going, gosh, guys, I'm really sorry. You're not going to be able to do it for this price. It's just simply not going to happen. And so we're going to have to rebid this. We're going to have to figure out what it's going to take to actually do this. And so I think that's something else that churches need to really be conscious of as they're looking at their financial planning and thinking about deferred maintenance is, dealing with deferred maintenance is important. Dealing with ongoing capital expenditures is important. Obviously, we're playing around with limited funds, and that's why having some kind of strategic plan where you really have a work plan and you really know what's going on with your campus, how much remaining useful life you have in some of your bigger systems, so you can start to put cost to those and start to plan for the replacement becomes really important.
Good. Market trends. What are we seeing there?
Well, I mean, we've talked about kind of where we are with cost and inflation. We've talked a little bit about the fact that deferred maintenance is becoming a hot button issue for a lot of other people. I think those are some pretty important trends for people to pay attention to. I think one of the other trends that we're seeing is churches used to traditionally get a pass from a lot of municipal governments or things when where the state imposes new restrictions or new regulations, and people would kind of worry about it on other properties, but not so much at churches, and that's kind of going away now. So we're seeing a lot more things come down, and this goes in waves. Like we saw a lot of churches getting dinged for their church kitchens about 10 years ago. There was like a 5-year period where every health department was cracking down on church kitchens.
Okay.
I think we're going to continue to see that kind of churches. Bottom line, churches just aren't going to get a pass on some of these things, and so that's just going to be one more complicating factor in how are you sitting there and making sure that you're keeping up with these things, while also balancing that with the need to be welcoming and be doing ministry and doing the things that church is all about.
Matthew, thank you for being here. Good information. So you guys to know, we are expanding this. We're going to have a church maintenance workshop, co-sponsored with Church and Casualty Insurance Agency and Southern Cross Property Consultants on August the 28th from 8:30 to 11 at Faith Chapel in Spring Valley. We'll have some more information coming out on that. We also are going to have Matthew's facilities House of Worship risk management checklist available on our website as well. Again, that's at ccia.com. So just look for that information in the future. And Matthew, where can people find you?
So we can be found at southerncrosspc.com, and there's information on there to be able to reach out and contact us. We're also on most of the social media platforms, so you can always reach out that way as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Look for that upcoming information, and thanks for joining us.